The Grand Prix Circus has come to North America for the first time in 1986. The Labatt Grand Prix of Canada takes place in the city of Montreal. Created 344 years ago by Mr. de Maisonneuve. It's the city that hosted the 1976 Olympics and is populated today by 2.5 million people. On this island of Notre Dame, where in 1967 Expo took place, they've used those roads around this island to create a racetrack. The track, it's called the Gilles Villeneuve racetrack, after that great Canadian racing driver who died just a few short years ago. Hello, I'm Jackie Stewart. Welcome to this pre-race report. You know, the mechanics that are working in these cars down there and the race drivers only 3 short days ago flew over the North Atlantic, some 3,500 miles. And in that distance, they changed time by about 6 hours. Now, if you were a businessman making a major decision, your company doctor would probably say to you, don't make that decision for at least 3 days after you've done a transatlantic flight, because of jet lag, because of the time change, because of what your body metabolism is doing. Those people haven't had that privilege. Within about 24 hours of arriving here, they were preparing race cars and driving them in some cases. Now, the split-second decision that can make the difference between life and death are in those people's hands. Now, I, as a racing driver in the past, somehow or other managed to do it because we couldn't afford the time of getting 3 or 4 days in advance of any event just to accommodate time change. Somehow or other, the adrenaline pumping through the body was able to deal with it. But there was a lot of incidents here on Friday and Saturday leading up to this race. In the rain on Friday, we had turbos blow and cars catch fire. Was that because of carelessness and bad preparation, or was it just normal? We had drivers spin out quite often on the wet and slippery conditions. Perhaps that was normal as well. But we also had a few drivers make fairly major errors and come into contact with walls and barriers quite firmly. Was that quite normal? I don't think so. There seemed to be more here in Montreal than there have been in those previous Grand Prix. Perhaps because their time clock in their body is waking up at a different time. They should be sleeping or eating when they're doing something else. Time change does play havoc to people. Now, unfortunately, I'm not able to do the commentary on this Labatt Grand Prix of Canada because of a prior commitment that I have with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. But, of course, you and ESPN will be getting your normal good quality. You're going to have Larry Nuber and John Bisignano do that race report and commentary, of course. And we'll be right back after this to introduce them. This pre-race report has been brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
This is Larry Nuber with John Bisignano, and we are just minutes away from the start of the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix, and this is part of the appeal of this course. We are standing adjacent to the rowing course from the 1976 Olympics. Well, on Friday, the weather here was absolutely abominable, and it created, I feel, one of the most exciting practice and qualifying sessions that I've ever seen. But on Saturday, the sun came out, and it created a personal battle between Nigel Mansell and Ayrton Senna for the pole, but it turned out a little different than it has 3 other times this year.
Larry, that battle you're talking about, it's been going on for 6 Grand Prix now. Actually started last year in Australia, but this time Senna tried every trick in the book and some that weren't even in the book, but he could not knock Nigel Mansell off pole position. His first pole so far this year.
Well, I've spent most of the weekend watching practice and qualifying on the monitor, and 2 teams which did not figure into the top 4 at the final qualifying runs were Ligier and McLaren's, but they left a big impression on me. They look very smooth.
Well, the Ligiers have been doing better every race, and they are now considered a threat by all the other competitors. Now, Prost with the McLaren team. You know, McLaren doesn't spend a whole lot of time on what you call a qualifying setup. They use the time for a race setup. So with Prost in 4th position, he's a full second behind the pole setter, but for a race setup, they know exactly what's going to be happening, and you can watch him coming through that grid.
Well, as you can tell, we are actually on an island, the Ile Notre Dame, and we are just moments minutes away from the start now of the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix, and here is the starting grid. As we mentioned, pole sitter Nigel Mansell, just 7/100ths of a second faster than Ayrton Senna in the Lotus. Mansell's teammate Nelson Piquet, a former two-time world's champion, is third, and defending world's champion Alain Prost is fourth. René Arnoux has moved the Leger to fifth on the starting grid this week, and Keke Rosberg, Alain Prost's teammate, is sixth. Gerhard Berger has qualified well again, seventh in the Benetton car, and Jacques Lafitte has taken the other Ligier to eighth. Pat Tracy is ninth. Warwick moves over to that team. He is in 10th. Qualifying 11th, Michele Alboreto. Lots of problems this weekend. Terry Boutsen is 12th. Alain Jones, another former world's champion, 13th, and his teammate, Patrick Tambay, is 14th. Bobby goes 15th. Dumfries, which is Senna's teammate, of course, is 16th. Philippe Streff is 17th. Stefan Johansson had a miserable weekend, is only 18th on the starting grid. Brundle is 19th. Nannini 20th. De Chester is 21st. Halmer 22nd. Genzani 23rd. Raffengatter is 24th. And Christian Danner brings up the rear of the field on the 25th position on the grid. We'll be back with the start of the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix right after this.
This pre-race report has been brought to you by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
Larry Nuber and John Bisignano standing by for the start of the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix. The Big Five of 1986 are here, of course, as they are. There is the remains, or at least some of the remains, of a practice shunt which involved Patrick Tambay this morning in the final reconnaissance lap for these drivers.
Larry, as you can see, he's very gently being lifted out of the car. He bruised his foot. He has had ankle and leg injuries before, and this was a very unfortunate thing to happen, especially in the morning practice. He does not have time to recover physically, and he will not be starting the Canadian Grand Prix. Patrick Tambay in the Beatrice Ford-powered car out of this race.
Well, it's been a tough weekend for Patrick. As a matter of fact, yesterday in the final qualifying session, the engines are being fired. This is the final lap. They will have one opportunity to take a lap around this course here at Montreal, just south of Montreal on the Ile Notre Dame, before the official start of the race. I was telling you about Patrick. Yesterday, the wing fell off twice, and he had to drive over it. No major damage there, but it's been a long weekend.
It's a beautiful shot of Nigel Mansell. As we said in the opening of the program, Nigel has a responsibility here, his first pole position of this very early season yet, but Nigel has had trouble in the opening laps of several other Grand Prix, and I think he is absolutely convinced to make that first lap a very clear one. Once he gets settled into the race, he's absolutely devastating, but those first two laps, Nigel Mansell has to maintain mental control and control of his vehicle.
Now, you see the green flag coming up. Those of you who follow Formula One racing, of course, know what's going on, but for you Americans who perhaps aren't as familiar, the race has actually officially started in terms of counting laps, but the green flag as such is not underway.
There's a nice overlay of the course. As you can see, it is on an island. This island was first used for Expo. That was in 1967, and the cars are coming out where the checkered flag is there. You can see the little light. That's the camera position that they are looking at, that down that long main straightaway. Cars hitting 180 miles an hour here into the right-hander and down another short chute. They are up into fourth gear there, but only doing about 165 before they have to put on the binders into what Larry and I term the south hairpin.
John, the south end is to your left, the north end is to the right, for those of you home watching. And you can see the basic shape of this track. It's kind of ironic. Can you imagine either a Formula One car or an Indy car without wheels and without a rear wing? Basically, or maybe like a deflated football is this course. Now, this is that south end. They're coming around that hairpin. They're now bending around toward the backstretch.
You can see the camera position there again. The cameras are very well placed on this 15-turn corner, 15 corners on the circuit. You can see the camera light moving slowly up the grid underneath the bridge. The drivers here will tend to be going down the short chute onto that straightaway. There'll be an awful lot of braking in this area, and this is a track where you can overtake several different positions on the brakes, and you have to be careful later in the race because of brake fade and so forth. There have been a lot lot of brake pads changed in the qualifying and in the pre-race practices, and they are really concentrating a great deal on letting those brakes cool down the straightaway, and the straightaways are not that long, so they have to be very gentle and efficient in their braking.
This shot right here is the second longest part of this course. The speeds will get up into the vicinity of 170 plus going down there. We'll call it the backstretch. This is sort of the end of that before a chicane, as you can see on the graphic at the lower part of your screen, right in the middle. The backstretch is divided by the chicane. As a matter of fact, a number of the drivers told me that this is basically a course of chicanes. There are 4 of them around this 2.74-mile course. Now we are approaching the pit hairpin at the north end of the racetrack.
And this is the point where most of the overtaking will be taking place. There was a great amount of drama here last year with Elio De Angelis and his Lotus, and of course with the 2 Ferraris last year actually touching wheels several times with Michele Alboreto and Stefan Johansson.
Now, once the car stopped, there's a shot from the in-car camera, the Tiro. Once the car stopped on the front stretch, of course, watch for the green light. When the red light comes on, anytime between 4 and 7 seconds after that red light, we'll start this race. One quick pit note, Jonathan Palmer in the Zakspeed car and Christian Danner have both remained in the pits during this final warm-up lap. So they have already, in effect, lost a lap in this race.
Both of those cars have their motors running, and they will be able to exit the pit lane immediately when the last car has passed. But it's certainly not the way to start this Grand Prix from the pit lane. The back of the grid moving up now, you'll see a light come into the picture that will be yellow and then turn green in the 1980.
Okay, watch for the red light. Remember that one of the fastest parts of this racetrack are right after the start. The red light is on, anywhere from 4 to 7 seconds. Nigel Mansell getting ready, green light. The race is underway.
Nigel Mansell certainly making it into the first corner very clearly. This is what Nigel must do well here. He has had some very bad first laps at other events, and he's certainly proving himself to be able to take that green light.
And Ayrton Senna, his arch rival, is the one who is right behind him. You see Keke Rosberg in the second McLaren car trying to make a move in the bright rocket red and white car. They are moving down toward the south end of this racetrack. This is the hairpin. This marks about 1/3 of the way around the race course, and Nigel Mansell has a comfortable lead for this early in the race.
Well, right now, actually, he has a comfortable lead because the gentlemen behind him have been interfering with one another's driving to the point where they're slowing each other down considerably. Ayrton Senna certainly blocked Alain Prost there. Nigel Mansell was sort of taking advantage of that traffic behind him, but so far I don't see anyone off the track. The first lap is certainly the most hectic. Nelson Piquet has actually dropped back a position. He is in 4th place now.
John, this is the first half of that long backstretch. You can see how quickly they move down this about 1/8 of a quarter of a mile strip. There goes Mansell going by, Senna, then Prost, and then Mansell's teammate Keke Rosberg.
Speaking of Keke Rosberg, in the morning warm-up, it doesn't have anything to do with qualifying or your race starting, but it is a good indication of how the cars will run under race conditions, and Keke Rosberg was fastest this morning in the Marlboro McLaren with Prost second.
The pit hairpin, the north end of the racetrack, coming down toward the start-finish line. 2 laps, remember, 2 laps officially now have been completed, and there is Prost looking to the inside of Ayrton Senna, and Ayrton Senna, just like at Brazil when Nigel Mansell tried to get underneath, said, no way.
I'll tell you, Larry, I think Ayrton is holding up this whole group at the moment. Prost certainly has a possibility of going around him twice on that first lap, and then right in the opening part of the second lap, he took another good look on the inside, but Ayrton Senna is not going to let him by.
Well, John, this morning's sessions normally is an indication of how the cars will perform under race conditions, and in race trim, we believe this morning Senna was only the 11th quickest, despite the fact that he was number 2 on the grid, only 11th this morning, and Mansell is really using this to his advantage.
Well, Nigel Mansell must love the view in his mirrors at the moment. He has, I would say, a good 2-second advantage, which on the first lap is not a bad advantage to build up whatsoever. The Lotus is a Renault-powered car, and as you can see, he is certainly getting the power down, but it looks like on the brakes he's having a problem where the people behind him are actually able to catch him up very well. The car is putting the power down on the ground extremely well, the Lotus, but on the braking, Prost is looking on the inside, but no, he stays behind. I see no changing behind him. At the moment, Senna is second, Prost is third, Nelson Piquet is fourth, Keke Rosberg fifth, and the problem of, now here we go, Prost on the inside. taking a good look, but still, he's just playing with Senna, trying to suck him into a mistake.
That is our new running in sixth in that blue and white car, just getting into the top of your screen. Allen's going to try once again. No! Ayrton once again closes the door in the same place there in the middle of the front stretch.
I'll tell you, Larry, it's a very dangerous place to get around Ayrton Senna. The cars are very tweaked up there. It's an extremely fast corner. And Ayrton, if they were to touch there, it's not like touching at a hairpin. They're doing well over 100 miles an hour, near on 120 miles an hour at that particular point. And Prost had better be extremely careful trying to take away center ground on that particular piece of road.
And John, nobody is off the accelerator there. They're actually just kind of feathering it through, not even feathering.
Just a lift.
Yeah, they're thinking about it and lifting up the foot for just a second. They're basically accelerating when they get to that point. So as you can say, it's a pretty dangerous place to try and make a pass.
Keke Rosberg has come around into fourth position now.
Well, the first laps of this race have come off without a hitch. Right now, Ayrton Senna is holding back the rest of the field, and Nigel Mansell is really taking advantage. The 1986 Canadian Grand Prix is being brought to you by BF Goodrich TA Radials, built for you to take on the road. Alain Prost has just gotten around Ayrton Senna. He is followed by his teammate Keke Rosberg, and what a move of strength it was. Alain Prost, after following for about 3.5 laps, said, "I have had enough." He moved alongside of Senna. It was very obvious that Senna did not want to give way. You can see one of the Williams cars also moving by Senna in the background. I'm guessing, well, it's got to be Nelson Piquet, because his teammate Nigel Mansell is leading this race.
Arnoux has also gone around the Lotus now. In fact, Ayrton Senna may have a problem, because right in that 1/4 of a lap, 6 cars went around Ayrton Senna. And now, I'll tell you, it was one of the bravest passes I've ever seen, Larry. It was just right at that point where we were saying that he would hope he would never try to do it, and he did it. And actually, here's the replay. Look at Ayrton Senna. Certainly does not want him to come through. Ayrton forced up on the curb. He's giving some of his own lessons are getting back to him, actually. He's been training everyone in those all season long. But Alain Prost certainly has the bravery to do those type of things, and the confidence and the equipment. As you could see, the Lotus got a little bit sideways in that situation, being pushed up to the left of the circuit, but the McLaren just held its groove extremely well, and now Alain Prost and Keke Rosberg, his teammate behind him, are in hot pursuit of this man, Nigel Mansell.
Well, the three of them, the three that John just mentioned, are among the top 5, the big 5, if you will, of 1986 Formula One Grand Prix racing. 4 of the big 5 have won a race so far this year, in the early part of the season, but the one who has not won is Keke Rosberg. He had a pretty good week. A lot of people, because it rained here on Friday and Saturday, had eventful practice and qualifying sessions. But 2 teams had good, clean weekends, and they were the McLarens and the Ligiers. And I would imagine that Rosberg thinks maybe this might be his week. He certainly has to come into today with a lot of confidence.
Well, confidence is one thing Keke Rosberg has always had a great deal of, and he knows how to use it, especially in a situation like this. His teammate is in front of him. They are allowed to race. There are no team rules between drivers on the McLaren team, anyway. Certainly, Niki Lauda last year with Alain Prost going for the championship, the two of them proved that many times over, especially in Holland. But Nigel Mansell, he's certainly in a view of his own right now. As you can see, the cameras can't even keep him in the second-place car of Alain Prost in the same picture.
Well, let's once again, for those of you who may have just tuned in, there come the 2 McLarens, give you a brief description of this racetrack. We called it before, it's basically the shape of a deflated football. If you see that basic shape of the race car, take the wheels off from a side profile and a rear wing, and you got the layout of this course. Now, this is coming back down the rear of the engine cowling. This is the north end, one of 2 hairpins on this race course, which makes it possible for you to really kind of keep track of what's going on. We're coming down by the pit area. We are headed basically in a southerly direction right now, around the base of the bottom of the race car. That is Nelson Piquet, the teammate of the current leader, Nigel Mansell, moving through the relatively high-speed front straightaway, which is basically divided into 2 sections. You can see that bridge in the background, the traffic going by. Whenever you see that all day long, you'll know that the cars have just passed by the start-finish line, just passed by the pit. Now, there is Ayrton Senna. Despite losing those 5 or 6 positions about a lap ago, he seems now to be holding his own. They are approaching a series of S-turns. Now they are coming down to the south end of this racetrack, which is one of 2 hairpins, which in effect divide this racetrack in half. Now you head back toward the northerly direction. You're working your way up around basically the front of a race car. Now, there are a lot of S's and a lot of chicanes, and of course right and left-handers as there are in all road courses, but that gives you basically an idea of how to keep track here at Canada.
When the leader came by, he was 5.7 seconds ahead of the second-place driver, Alain Prost. So that's certainly a very good lead, especially with only 5 or 6 laps completed in the event. At the moment, we have Nigel Mansell first with Prost second, Rosberg third, Piquet fourth, Arnoux in the Ligier, and that is the first car with Pirelli tires on it. The tires will become more important as the race goes on, of course. And right now, Senna is in 6th place. He went from 2nd to 6th in about a quarter of a lap, and that's a new record for Senna, actually, Larry.
Backwards.
Now, he's done that going forwards, but I've never seen him do it in reverse before.
John, you mentioned tires. Let's talk just a little bit about it. The teams like to protect some intrigue and some secrets. There's a breakdown of the first 6 at this point. You can see Mansell, Prost, Rosberg, Piquet, and so on. The teams like to maintain a little bit of intrigue, and we don't really know if everybody's going to have to stop. We'll get back to that story after this commercial message coming up. We are in Canada on the Ile Notre Dame, and Nigel Mansell's looking real tough here early. We've had a spin. One of the
Patrese in the Olivetti Brabham almost pulled out right in front of his teammate, Derek Warwick.
Derek, of course, is the new entry for that Olivetti team this weekend. He replaces, of course, Elio De Angelis, who unfortunately did lose his life in a Formula One car earlier this year in practice. Now, you're looking at the battle of the McLarens right now. The two red and white, they appear on your screen. It's actually a rocket red color, they call it, or international orange, some people like to refer to it. It looks to me like Keke is really putting the pressure on Alain.
Keke wants to put the pressure on Alain. Here we have the spin coming up. You can see the Brabham trying to go around the Tolman, and he just simply loses it. And he did not go far enough off the track, actually. He could have reversed back a little bit further and made it a bit of more of a safe move, but he did keep the motor going. You saw the little blast of flame coming out of the tailpipe. When a driver spins like that, he has to think of 2 things. Number 1, downshifting so that he's in the right gear when to pull away, and number 2, to put in the clutch. That clutch is what allows the engine not to be stalled by the tires reversing themselves in a reverse motion. So even though you might have a millisecond to compute all this, they have practiced this in other formulas, and therefore they are able to keep the engine running in most circumstances.
John, that last shot was a shot that we hadn't seen in this broadcast yet, just to kind of fill you in. That's a camera that's in a little peninsula of land that separates the end of the long backstretch and the front stretch.
A beautiful view that we've seen many times on ESPN Formula One coverage. The only difference this year from last year is that the fact the gentleman in the number 2 car is the teammate Keke Rosberg to Alain Prost rather than Niki Lauda. Niki Lauda retiring for the 2nd time out of Formula One at the end of last year. Christian Danner is out of the race, unfortunately. Nelson Piquet is the fastest tour, 180 kilometers. That's 112 miles an hour. Nelson Piquet certainly has the ability to go very quickly, and has just turned the fastest lap here in Montreal.
Pretty interesting, because Nelson still resides in 4th position, chasing both of the McLarens plus his teammate. But obviously, Nelson Piquet is loaded for bear, as we say back home in the States, and perhaps could still be a threat in this event today.
Larry, the thing is, there's a great deal of rivalry between all Grand Prix drivers, but especially teammates. There has to be a great incentive for the 2 drivers to be the number 1 driver in the team. And although top teams like the Williams and McLaren do not designate number 1 and number 2 drivers anymore, it's a matter of pride. Not only pride of drivers, but mechanics. There's a great amount of rivalry between team drivers.
John, we just mentioned a couple of minutes ago that Christian Danner has dropped out of this race. By the way, Christian almost ended up in the 2nd USF&G Barclays Aero this weekend, right, John?
Exactly. That's a very difficult story to give you all the facts on, because many things were done behind closed doors, but it was for the replacement of Mark Suhr, and Christian Danner hopes to be driving for the team in Detroit.
McLaren, number 1, number 2, number 2 and number 3 in the race. Alain Prost, the defending world's champion, the only man who has won 2 times so far in 1986. Number 2, Keke Rosberg, himself a former world champion, a year, by the way, in which he only won 1 event. He is among the non-winners, but probably easily the fastest and the brightest prospect among the non-winners of 1986.
Also, we have to certainly point out that the Ferrari driver Stefan Johansson from Sweden had a miserable Friday and Saturday qualifying practice, whatever it was. He could only put together 6 laps in one practice session. And also that Stefan Johansson has moved from his 18th qualifying position up to 8th place at this particular point. So the Ferraris, both Alboreto and Johansson, running 8th and 9th at the moment, and we're going to see great things from Stefan coming out through the rest of this event.
Well, just to quickly run down, Mansell, Prost, Rosberg, of course, we've documented that many times. Piquet still 4th. Arnoux is 5th. Senna is 6th. Berger is 7th. Michele Alboreto 8th. Teammate Stefan Johansson 9th, as John mentioned. And Jacques Lafitte is 10th. Followed in order at this point in the race by Patrese, Warwick, Boutsen, Brundle, Dumfries, De Chasseres, Streff, and Fabi.
Boutsen came very quickly into the pits and back out again. We don't know exactly what the pit stop was for. We'll try and get a report on that. But the Barclay Arrows came in and just momentarily stopped and went straight back out again.
Alain Prost, who leads this head-to-head matchup right now, this fence, this duel, he has scored World Championship points in the last 4 races in a row, only failing to score in Brazil, a race that we brought you here on ESPN, of course, at the very first venue of the year. His teammate Keke Rosberg has scored points in 3 of the last 4 events, so both of them are somewhat on a roll that was expected, I might add, in terms of World Championship points.
There, I think it's heating up between these 2 teammates at the moment. You saw Keke Rosberg, certainly the back end of the car, getting up onto the curbing there, coming out of that very quick 4th gear left-hander. And actually, here's one of the Minardis in the pits. It's Andrea De Cesaris, the Italian driver, a Pirelli-shod car also.
Unless he was terribly disappointed with the tires, this is a little too early to come in, so I doubt that it was planned. It appeared to be obviously a stop for tire change, so obviously he was quite displeased.
He may have picked the wrong compound for such a fast, heated-up conditions that have gone on here. Most of the practice and qualifying, the air temperature has been quite a bit cooler, so if they were totally relying on their calculations from on Friday and Saturday's weather, he certainly may have picked too soft of a compound in this bright sunshine on the Sunday.
We also would like to offer, by the way, before we forget it, a very happy Father's Day to everybody. We know that this is a very special day for most of the men in the country, and we're very pleased to once again pass along Happy Father's Day to everybody who's watching, who is a father, who ever thought about being a father. The 2 McLarens, they run 2nd and 3rd of the track. Both continue to chase Nigel Mansell. It's still his race. There's Ayrton Senna in the middle of this group of 3 cars coming around the pit hairpin. There are the 2 McLarens. Look very carefully. The order is not the same.
Exactly. Keke Rosberg put a beautiful maneuver on his teammate, Alain Prost, just at the point where you saw there at the pit hairpin. I would say Prost more or less let him by, even though he took a second look at it, but he said, Keke, you are the fastest man at this particular point in the race. Go for it.
Now, this race will go 77 laps. We have completed 10 laps, so there's still a long ways to go. And those of you who follow motor racing know that what happens sometimes in the first 10 laps of the race is really no indication of how this race might end. Now, there is Nigel Mansell, who is beginning to work his way through slower traffic, and look how close Rosberg has moved up immediately.
Well, exactly. He's being slowed down by the Zach Speed car there, and Nigel Mansell has being blocked there. Also, Keke Rosberg by the Zach Speed car, and Nigel Mansell has certainly lost that 5-second lead. Being blocked again, Keke Rosberg must be getting a little bit excited, but you have to remember that these cars, there is a line on this racetrack, and if you get outside of that line, especially in the S's where that incident was taking place, he's putting himself in a very bad position. It's very easy to let someone by under braking or on the straightaway, but through those S's, if you become too much of a gentleman and get on what we call the marbles, he could end up in the guardrail in just a heartbeat.
Yeah, John, this is not a wide racetrack, but it's not a narrow racetrack. I think I would classify it as a very fair racetrack. This shot right there, you can see the cement with the chain link fencing above it. You've seen all the water around this course. There's somewhat of a reminiscent of it for me to Portland, as a matter of fact, where the Indy cars will be performing later this afternoon live on ESPN.
There you have the Benetton car in the pits.
Teo Fabi, of course, was being shown in 16th position, and Gerhard Berger was being shown in 10th position. From our vantage point where we are, car. We could not tell exactly which Benetton car it was, but Teo crashed here in qualifying in the rain on Friday. It was a much smoother weekend for Gerhardt. He has been among the top 10 again all weekend long.
Of course, Gerhard Berger last year driving for the USF&G Arrows team. They wanted to keep him in the car for this season, but the Benetton team stole him away from the Arrows organization. BMW powers both those cars, and Gerhard Berger has proved so far this year as the new young lion in Formula One.
The left car between, there you see him on the screen, right between Nigel and KK is the other, and you saw him motioning, it's Hugh Rothengatter. That's the other Zaxbyt car. He pointed to the right for KK to go by, and like the gentleman, both of them are, at least behind the wheel and on a racetrack, KK moves by without incident.
It's rare that you see the little hands coming up these days and making a friendly gesture in Formula One. There are certainly some other gestures in Formula One that we don't want close-ups on, but that was a little bit of very respectable behavior on Hoop Rottengatter from Holland, the tallest and heaviest driver in Formula One, actually. Hoop, he's about 6 feet 4 inches tall, and his knees had to have a little bit modification on, not his knees, but the race car had to have a little bit of modification for his knees to fit into that Zaxbyt West Special.
That is the newest team, or at least the newest car that has entered the Formula One circuit. Teo Fabi there is the Benetton car that is in the pit area. The engine cover is off. Teo, again, as we mentioned, crashed on Friday here. He's had a really tough 3 days, John.
Ayrton Senna circling around. He certainly must not be too terribly pleased with the way the situation has developed here in Montreal for him. He has not come in the pits. He has not changed tires. He was a bit concerned before the race about the rear suspension on the car. This is the Lotus that in testing several weeks ago in Circuit Paul Ricard, 2 sets of rear suspension identically designed failed in identically the same manner. For the Spa Belgium event, they actually put last year's rear suspension on this year's car, which he felt was a heavy handicap in that race, only allowing him to come into second place.
Here comes Rosberg. It looks like he may have Manzo. Rosberg goes to the inside or to the left side, and we have a new leader, KK Rosberg. Nigel Mansell not giving up, stays on the line. He holds on the high side, but that's not the fastest line around that hairpin.
What a beautiful pass that was for KK Rosberg, and also a great deal of respect shown between those two drivers. Not bumping wheels, not getting too excited. Very professional, both of them, of course, but KK Rosberg, just once he got around his teammate, he has pulled away from him and has caught Nigel Mansell with no problem whatsoever.
John, I was about to say, I really like Rosberg. Here's a replay of that pass again.
You can see it's certainly in the braking area. As we said earlier, brakes are very important here, and especially in Montreal, going into the north and south hairpins. But KK Rosberg, in this untimed practice session this morning, we keep referring to this because all weekend long the cars run with a little bit of fuel, trying to get that best qualifying position out of them. And as we said in the pre-race, McLaren concentrates on the race setup, not so much the qualifying setup, and it's certainly paying off here. But in the untimed race practice this morning with full tanks, KK Rosberg was the fastest out of the entire field, with Alain Prost second and Nigel Mansell third. And as I can see here, Prost is also coming up on Nigel, so that pre-warm-up this morning of 1, 2, and 3 may develop here on the circuit in just a few moments.
John, I started to say a little bit ago that I really like KK this weekend. I've had the feeling all along, even though he didn't qualify on the pole, that he, perhaps just a touch more than everybody else, maybe was a little bit more hungry. I mentioned those big 5 a couple of times. He's the only one that doesn't have a win, and it sure seems like he is due. And the McLaren car and the Ligier cars, which are not figuring up into the top 3 right now, there is the number 24 car of Alexander Nannini coming to a stop right here on the front stretch, right in front of the pits. Nannini will move up to the left side, and hopefully they can get that car to crawl down just past the pit area and get it out of the way.
That's a dangerous place for a car to be stopped. It's one of the fastest parts of the circuit. The back end of the car seems to be a little bit more than a turbo fire going on there now. Nannini says, I'm not going to get too close to this. But as you can see, the safety marshals were there very quickly, and the safety vehicle, so we hope that the car won't be damaged too much, especially with Detroit only a week away. The car is burning. They are moving out towards it, of course. Nannini, as you saw, was very quickly out of the car on his own power.
And like so many Formula One drivers, as well as IndyCar drivers these days, John, they are very much involved in directing the safety operations. You know, there was a time 3 or 4 years ago when a lot of the teams were complaining about the type of service, emergency service they got, and the drivers now have a habit of really getting involved firsthand.
Well, the reason that is, a race car driver, especially a Formula One driver or any race car driver, has a tendency to be able to think extremely well and quickly and proficiently in an excited, intense situation. Therefore, when you have a marshal who's been sitting along a guardrail for an hour and a half or even 10 minutes, his mind is not wound up as quickly as a race car driver who's been circling this course well over 100 miles an hour average. So when you see a race car driver jump out of his equipment and take control of the situation, it's because his adrenaline is pumping so fast and he's thinking so quickly and he's so in tune with the situation that he is actually the most efficient person to handle it.
Keke Rosberg, as we're looking at the USF&G Barclays Arrows with Terry Boutsen behind the wheel. Keke Rosberg, who's had a best finish of second at the Monaco Grand Prix so far in 1986. He was running second in Imola, but he ran out of gas very late in the race and had to settle for 5th position. Could Keke Rosberg be en route to his first win of 1986? Right now, he looks like the man in the catbird seat. The sport with the true World Series, Formula One Grand Prix racing continues on its run for 1986 on ESPN. We will next on the 6th of July be in France, where Nelson Piquet returns to La Castellet to defend his 1985 crown. Of course, everybody you're watching here today will be there to try and assert themselves for the current season. That event will be at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 7 a.m. Pacific Time, the 6th of July, the Formula One French Grand Prix.
You know, Larry, maybe you should have let me do that promo for you, saying that Formula One is the true world championship. You're going to have to pay some bills when you get out to the kart and NASCAR boys, you know?
Oh, I assume they weren't listening. They're all up at Portland today getting ready for the Indianapolis car race, and Lord knows where the stock car guys are down south. I think that all broadcasting, at least north of the Mason-Dixon line, it doesn't go further south than that, so they couldn't hear this anyway.
Well, Jackie Stewart and I, we wish we would have known that they were all watching while we were sitting in Belgium talking, because we certainly would have tuned into them a bit more in the garages in a rainy Indianapolis that day.
Yeah, it was.
One thing that developed is, again, we said that Stefan Johansson from Sweden doing an excellent job. He is now in hot pursuit of Rene Arnoux in the Ligier, coming up to 6th place. Stefan Johansson, again, starting way back in the grid, having his worst time in qualifying and in practice for both Friday and Saturday, but we will keep you in tune with that development a little bit down the grid.
You know, John, talking about Stefan, as we continue to watch Rosberg moving up on Alan Jones, the former world's champion. There's Nigel Mansell right behind Keke, and Keke having to take a higher line than he prefers there, moving through the S's, and now Mansell has an opportunity to challenge, but I don't think the line is going to be there. Alan's going to be in the way. Keke trying to figure out what's the best way to get through. He moves over too wide. He leaves Mansell with the door open.
There's a beautiful example of a bit of confusion up front. Alan Jones was actually trying to stay out of everyone's line. Keke Rosberg hesitating several times to take the open door that Jones had left him, but still, you get off that line in the S's and it's like ice out there. We have gone further enough now into the race where these marbles have, it's from tires and bit and grit of road all developed up, and you can see the door is wide open. Keke may have been in the wrong gear. Nigel certainly wasn't. Nigel blasted through there. Twice Keke Rosberg saw daylight and did not take advantage of it, and Alan Jones must have been wondering, come on, fellas, I'm up here on the grass.
He knew what
Go
to do.
for it. But Nigel Mansell back leading the Montreal Grand Prix, Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal.
John going through that hairpin, and now we have the number 8 car of Derek Warwick, obviously with some mechanical difficulties, and Derek's maiden voyage in the Brabham team has ended prematurely.
You see a great deal of sparks coming out from the bottom of these cars here. It's something that is normal, especially on a bumpy circuit like this. The cars are very soft, and under the weight of the full fuel situation at the beginning of the race, you'll see them bottoming out, especially the Williams and the Lotus. Now, as the cars lighten throughout the duration of the race, you'll see less and less sparks. But when you see those sparks, there are skid plates under there, and it's really not doing a great deal of damage.
Coming down at the end of the long front stretch, there is Nelson Piquet, who is running in 4th. You know, you just saw that pass by Nigel Mansell. We asked him earlier this weekend about where the good places are to pass at a course like here at Montreal.
How's this track when it comes to overtaking?
I think it's quite difficult because, I mean, it's got a short straight down the pit here, but if someone's positioning themselves correctly in front and they don't make a mistake, it's going to be tough to pass.
Seems like it's mostly done under braking here on the last hairpin.
I was going to say probably the favorite place and the safest place to pass is coming into the hairpin here before coming onto the pit straight, but even then it can be very, very tight.
Alain Prost running in 30s, the second McLaren car. I guess everybody who's followed racing for the last couple of decades knows what the McLaren cars look like. A car painted similar to that has made its way to the CART Indianapolis car series for 1986. There is Nigel Mansell, followed by Keke Rosberg. Those sparks that John was just talking about as the cars predictably bottom out, particularly in the first half of the race, and move around this circuit.
There's a shot of Stefan Johansson in the blue car. Just in front of him is the Ligier of Rene Arnoux. Arnoux, this is actually a great rivalry because it was Rene Arnoux that lost his Ferrari drive at the beginning of last season down in Brazil, and it was Stefan Johansson that took over his seat. So here you have the ex-Ferrari driver right in hot pursuit, or being hotly pursued by the gentleman who took his drive. And Rene Arnoux is tough enough to get around even when he likes you.
John, he has complained about understeer problems all year long, and the car was very loose in qualifying, even as late as yesterday. I'm a little surprised that he's performing so well, but as we mentioned a couple of times, he certainly gave us the sign that it might happen. There's his teammate, Michele Alboreto, right behind him. He gave us the sign, both of them this morning, that they would be tough in the race.
We understand that Emerson Fittipaldi, of course, world champion Formula One driver, is on pole out in Portland, a road circuit. Emerson should be in very good shape for the race out there, and we'd like to see the Formula One boys have a good day at both ends of the country.
Well, sort of.
Yeah, come on.
You know, I have to admit, I am a Yank down in my heart, but Emo is such a fine fellow. It's very difficult to not like Emo. He's a very easy man to talk to. He always has a smile on his face, completely relaxed, and he is really a nice addition to kart racing as it is in the States now.
Well, you'll be able to see that race on ESPN 5 o'clock Eastern time today. Beautiful long camera shot down that straightaway. You don't get a tremendous impression of how fast the cars are going down that straightaway, just topping 180 miles an hour in that location. But it is the camera itself that does that because it is such a long lens. But that is the fastest part on the circuit, somewhat dramatically shown by the sparks coming up from underneath the skid plates on the cars.
John, talking about that broadcast from Portland later this afternoon, one of the features that we will have will be about the untimely passing of Jim Trueman. Untimely because he is a young man, just 52 years of age. Jim Trueman, the winning owner from the 1986 Indianapolis 500, Bobby Rahals car owner, did pass away this Wednesday night. And I'll tell you, if for nothing else, there's a reason to stay tuned for just a conversation about Jim Trueman. I have seen very few men in my life who have set an example for all of us to follow. He handled his situation with a great deal of grace. He was very private about his illness for the last couple of years, and it truly was a rare privilege to know Jim Trueman. Nigel Mansell has taken over the lead, taken it back, actually. As you can see, it's hotly contested with Keke Rosberg. The other McLaren is Alain Prost.
Currently, there are several ideas in Formula One on how to make things safer. Number one, restrict horsepower. Therefore, by increasing safety, by making the cars actually go slower. Now, the problem is getting everyone to agree. You have manufacturers like Ferrari, BMW, Ford, and they all have different designs. This is the BMW 4-cylinder developing a screaming 1,000 horsepower, a bit too much for safety. Now, the most popular design study going on at the moment is to actually put a restrictor plate over the intake area of the turbo itself. Now, if you restrict the airflow into the turbo, what you're actually doing is regulating how much power the turbo can develop. Now, the good thing about it is that it is possible to graph exactly how much air can pass through the restrictor plate into the turbo to equal 600 horsepower. Therefore, the manufacturers hopefully can agree on a single design.
John, one of the alternatives to this turbocharging situation would be the installation of pop-off valves like Indianapolis cars have on them. Ken Tyrrell told me yesterday that he believes if they end up going that route, it will signal the death of the four-cylinder. There is Jonathan Palmer, Dr. Jonathan Palmer. We saw his teammate, Hugh Rothengatter, who had a problem, and it appeared to be exactly the same place, John.
Well, if a similar chassis has a similar problem, it looks like it could be a design fault. We saw it early in the F1 days of turbocharging. The Renault cars would actually go out on the same lap in the same point and come to a gliding stop together very dramatically. Not great for the PR program of Renault. Of course, they got things right after that and went on to do very well. And of course, their engines have been superior in the Lotus car, certainly this part of the year, doing very well.
John, back to that pop-off valve situation. It's such a prominent part of Indianapolis car racing. Ken Terrell, it seems like he would be right. I mean, we saw the demise of the Offenhausers once the 4 cylinders got that pop-off valve.
I think it would certainly be a difficult thing to control, a pop-off valve, when you have 6 cylinders, 4 cylinders, single turbo, dual turbo. Also, another type of restriction they're thinking about is using a smaller size engine, reducing the cubic capacity down to 1,200 or 1,300 cc's. Of course, that would be extremely expensive, virtually having to redesign both the bottom and the top end of the motor. So right now, the air restrictor is in the lead as far as acceptability to everyone.
We are about a third of the way into this race. 26 laps have gone by. There is the leader, Nigel Mansell. There is second place, Keke Rosberg. Alain Prost runs in third. Again, there's a nice ground level view of Keke swinging through the S-turns there at the south end of this racetrack. Quickly running down for you the first 18. As we see on our computer readout here, Piquet remains fourth. Senna holds fast in 5th position in that rapid Lotus. Rene Arnoux is 6th. Stefan Johansson has moved ahead of his teammate Michele Alboreto, and the Ferraris run 7th and 8th. Jacques Lafitte is 9th. Gerhard Berger in the other Benetton car. Teo Fabi has dropped out. He's showing his 10th. Patrese is 11th in the Brabham. Dumfries is, Martin Brundle is 12th. Dumfries is 13th. Terry Boutsen is in 14th in the USF&G Barclays Aero. Streff is 15th. Genzani is 16th. And Rothengatter is being shown in 17th position, but he has dropped out of this race.
If you hear a bit of feedback coming from Portugal and Brazil, and we have Rubberman down here from France, because his voice goes over everything that we've ever been able to fire back to him.
You got to tell everybody who Rubberman is.
In comes the pits. One of the McLarens coming into the pits. It's Keke Rosberg coming into the pits. He was losing ground a little bit there from Nigel Mansell. This could be a scheduled tire stop, but still, he's in the pits. 6 seconds going by, 7 seconds, 8. The mechanics have their arms down off the jacks, and you'll be seeing Keke coming out of these pits. Sideways once, sideways twice. He can do it 3 times there. And also came in one of the Lotuses back there. Well, Nigel Mansell has to be calculating his tire wear at the moment also. Coming up on some back markers, he looks very strong, but still, Nigel Mansell has to be thinking about a tire change. They are both on Goodyears. That's Dumfries coming out of the pits.
John, we just had brought up the subject of tires a little bit earlier in the broadcast. Nobody would really reveal exactly what they had to do, whether or not they had to stop. Obviously, you can find out what compound they're all starting on, but we kind of surmised that everybody would have to come in. It seems like this would be a logical point, about 1/3 of the race. We just told you a few moments ago that's how far we are. And it may be a situation that some of the other top runners, like Mansell and like Prost, will decide what to do with their race after they watch what everybody else does. As we saw in the second race of the year at Spain, you can go so much quicker on fresh tires than you can on old tires. And because Mansell stayed out maybe 1 or 2 laps too long, he chose to ignore the pit sign to come in and pit and change tires. It probably cost him the race in Spain.
You're exactly right, Larry. They're still talking about that particular decision. The pit actually has not the last word in saying when they're coming in. Here's one of the Williams cars down in there. We can't see which one because it's covered by mechanics, but I don't think it's Nigel. He's not in a position
for a red
in the
helmet.
place.
It is. It's Piquet, a red and white helmet. Yeah, that is Nigel.
You're absolutely right. Nigel Mansell must have been listening to you, Larry, because he has come in. There was an awful lot of discussion about that Spanish Grand Prix and who had the final decision on when he was going to come in. The pits told him to come in earlier, but he took his driver's option with the final decision, stayed out there, and lost the race by a millisecond.
Now, let's talk about Prost. He inherits the lead now because, and there's one of the Ferraris. That's the number 28 car of Stefan Johansson being hoisted over, and he's had a crash. Stefan Johansson has gotten into the inside barrier, the inside cement barrier around this 2.74-mile course. That was down near the south hairpin, about 1/3 of the way through the course, and what a disappointment for Stefan.
Well, he was in 7th place all the way up from way back in the grid. He has had just a terrible weekend, and unfortunately his bad luck has pursued him into the Sunday. You could see there's his teammate Michele Alboreto from Italy in the pits. Italian mechanics doing a very quick change. It looks like so far they had the quickest change at the last Grand Prix, which surprised everyone, just over 10 seconds. Ferrari mechanics certainly improving their pit performance here in the last couple races. But Stefan Johansson to go out of this particular race now is just absolutely devastating. He has driven up through the grid so well, and to have that right front corner dangling from the situation. Here comes Prost into the #1 car, current world champion Alain Prost coming into the McLaren pits.
Well, I guess because everybody else pitted so soon, I can't say that I'm surprised, but we've seen Alain protect his tires, protect his equipment so many times in other races. There have been races where everybody else was planning on pitting, and Prost, because he knew that he could...
It's getting a little long, Larry, the pit stop there.
Very long,
19.
Fact, decided that he would stay out. A 20-second pit stop for Prost, and boy, he is really going to have to drive the wheels off of that McLaren, that tag Porsche engine, to catch up with the 2 leaders. Now, Piquet is right behind his teammate, but I don't believe that Nelson has come in the pit yet, John.
We have not seen a shot of him in the pit, and I haven't noticed him come by our commentary position here. But Nelson Piquet is also a person who knows how to drive in a calculating manner, where he can save his fuel and save his tires and so forth. But certainly, Larry, he is going to have to stop. He's not going to be able to go the whole race distance on one set of tires.
With all the other leaders on fresh rubber, as we mentioned, it's going to make them significantly faster. You don't have any choice, particularly with 50-plus laps to go. You got to come in, too. I think we may be in store for some thrills, though. Alain Prost, when he turns it loose, he is as good a race driver as anybody. I know that a lot of people, including my esteemed colleague, Jackie Stewart, thinks that Nelson Piquet is the best race driver in the world. I lean kind of toward Prost. I've never seen anybody with the ability to go as fast as he can, so smoothly and so consistently, year after year, not just race after race.
Well, it's a very good analogy of Alain Prost and his style of driving. Sometimes he looks absolutely slow through the corners. He's so incredibly fast, and that same lap can be a new track record.
There go the leaders. Right there is Nigel Mansell. Now, the first pit stops, we believe to be the only pit stops, have taken place, and the strategy begins to unfold at the Canadian Grand Prix. This is really a beautiful setting. You can see the highway in the background. Again, that's about halfway down the long front stretch. There's leader Nigel Mansell. The other Lotus, probably Dumfries. No, it's Ayrton Senna has come in. We did see Dumfries earlier. Senna had not pitted yet. I stand corrected. I had assumed that all the leaders had pitted, and we're so accustomed to seeing Ayrton up front, you thought he would have come in, but this is his first stop.
It was interesting that they did not do anything else on the Lotus car except change the tires, so there is not a handling problem that they could have corrected in another 4 or 5 seconds. They just put on the rubber and sent him back out again, so Ayrton is stuck with the setup that he had in the early part of the race for the rest of this particular Grand Prix. Unfortunately, he is not really in a position to hassle or to come into the leaders right now. I was thinking maybe coming out of the pit stop we could have gotten him closer to the leaders so we could see if maybe these problems were the first set of tires, but at the moment he's going to have to do some tremendous driving and catching for us to get him in the same view with our leaders.
Just to recap once again the first 6, Nigel Mansell 4 seconds ahead of Nelson Piquet, whom we believe has to stop yet. Keke Rosberg just 5 seconds behind Mansell, 1 second behind Piquet in 3rd. Prost is 4th. Arnoux is in 5th position, but 28 seconds in arrears. Senna holds on to 6th, and we can run down for you the remaining top 10. Lafitte, Alboreto, Berger, and Petresi.
Not the smoothest circuit in Grand Prix racing. You can see the drivers taking a tremendous pounding over those bumps. If you can imagine hitting a bump like that at well over 100 miles an hour, as Nelson Piquet from Brazil comes sliding past the Data General Tyrrell.
That's Nigel.
I'm sorry, yeah. You're absolutely right.
The only way you can tell the 2 Williams cars apart, if you look very closely, Nigel's number is in red on the nose from a distance, and particularly through a television camera. Their helmets even look alike. Both of them are painted red and white. There's a little bit of blue on Nigel's helmet, but unless the sun is not reflecting off the nose, there's no way of telling them apart. Now, they help us out in a shot like that, don't they?
And you know, in Formula One, they have gone to such a commercialism in Formula One that the numbers are very, very small and and difficult for people to read, especially when the cars are in the sun and there's a glare on this very shiny fiberglass or carbon fiber surfaces. The reason numbers have become insignificant is because all the timing is done electronically. There's no one sitting up here looking at numbers and pushing stopwatches. Every car carries an onboard sending unit that when they cross the start-finish line, it sends out a signal and records that lap time. Each car has its own coded signal, so numbers have become a lesser degree of importance, certainly in Formula One.
John mentioned about the bumpiness of this course. Just a word about it now. This is, as you can tell, as the other Tyrrell comes in, Brundle? Yeah, Martin Brundle comes in. There's Piquet. Piquet hitting as we anticipated, the number 6 Williams Honda, getting away in about 10 seconds. A good stop for Nelson Piquet, who came in at about 28 seconds in arrears of the leaders.
So that's all of our leaders now, Larry, have come in and changed their tires, all within, well, 5 laps of one another, or 6 laps of one another. So we're going to see who is working best with the new rubber and who can close up the gaps. But it's certainly an advantage to be in the lead for Nigel Mansell at the moment.
Again, a little bit about the circuit. As John mentioned, it's very bumpy, but as you can tell, it is a permanent course. It is not a temporary circuit like these cars will be racing on in Detroit next week. And it really is a very nice circuit. I enjoyed my week here, John, very much, and I was reasonably impressed with the circuit. Believe it or not, I had never been here to the Ile Notre Dame to see this course, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I think it's a good race course, and we mentioned earlier, it seems to have the right width. It is not so wide as it gives an unfair advantage to somebody who's trying to get by you, but it's also not so narrow that you have an unfair disadvantage when you're trying to pass someone. We are on an island. You can see the water being separated all around you, plus there is a lagoon like at Portland in the center of this race course. There is the leader coming down past the pits again, one of 2 basically banana-shaped straightaways on this race course. This is, for lack of a better description, the front straightaway rather, running along, by the way, the crewing course for rowing for the 1980 Olympics here in Montreal. There was Alain Prost, who is running in fourth position. There is Keke Rosberg, who is in the runner-up position as we have completed 35 laps of the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix. Today, live on ESPN from Portland, Oregon, the G.I. Joe's IndyCar Championship at 5 p.m. You know, a couple of years ago, Al Unser Jr. won there on Father's Day his first ever Indianapolis-type car win, which obviously pleased his father, Al Unser Sr., a great deal. You're looking at Alain Prost, the defending world's champion, the man who has been the driver to beat in the past 3 seasons of Formula One racing. He came close a couple of times becoming the world's champion. It seemed like for a while he may have been star-crossed in his quest for the championship. But last year, he had just enough points to get by. As a matter of fact, he wrapped it up about 2 races before the season ended, if I remember correctly.
Well, that was a very comfortable way for him to wrap it up, especially last year he ran out of gas in the San Marino Grand Prix in Imola. And in running out of gas, the car became so light that he was 0.4 of a kilo underweight and had the 9 points eliminated from him. He ran out of gas on the cool-off lap after winning the event, and therefore his team was extremely worried when things got tight between him and Alboreto in the middle of last season. If he was to lose the World Championship for a 3rd time, it'd be a 3rd-time bridesmaid because of those 9 points. I think there would have been some suicides in the McLaren garage after the World Championship had not gone his way.
For those of you who are motorcycle fans, who might be motorcycle fans, I like to liken his career to Bubba Schobert, the guy who runs AMA Grand National Motorcycle Racing. Of course, he runs steeplechases, short tracks, and half miles. He had the same situation. It just seemed like it was not in the cards for him to be the national champion. Well, both Bubba Schobert, and this man, Alain Prost, won last year, and it was a very rewarding year and a very rewarding time for people who follow racing closely. Just a little bit about the fuel. John mentioned what had happened to Alain in a race, particularly last year. You know, these Formula One cars, they've got a formula that it's in the vicinity of 3.5, 3.7 miles per gallon, which is significantly longer than what the Indianapolis cars are set up to go. As you know, the formula there is only about 1.8 miles per gallon. There is no refueling that is allowed during a Formula One race.
Well, we had refueling a couple years ago, and it was so dangerous in the pit area. They are not really built for refueling situations such as maybe Indianapolis or several other of the kart circuits around the nation. So it became so dangerous that they simply just said no more refueling in Formula One. And of course, fuel has become the most calculated object to control with engine management systems and so forth, to make sure that the turbos are in tune with the onboard computer, and the driver can see the readout that allows him to tell himself how far and how fast he can push the equipment and still have at least a half a pint of fuel left at the end of the race.
The Indy cars carry 40 gallons. The Formula One cars, the new allotment for 1986 was 195 liters. No, I don't know what the exact translation is, but I figured it out. It's 51.5 U.S. gallons. That's the approximation.
Now, that's not imperial gallons. You're sure about that?
Oh, I think so.
That's Ayrton Senna trying to make his way around Rene Arnoux in the Ligier. As you can see, Ayrton Senna is certainly not up to his previous Grand Prix performances. And here comes Jacques Laffite, the oldest driver in Formula One, into the pits. Jacques Laffite is the only driver in Formula One that I used to race against in Formula 3. That shows you how old he is.
Or how old you are.
Shows how old he is. And he is still doing well. You can see the tube going into his mouth is a liquid on-taking tube. It has gotten quite warm here, and the driver can be in a cockpit that is certainly well over 110 degrees, even under these 80-degree outside temperatures. But as we can see here, here's his teammate, Rene Arnoux, leading the Lotus of Ayrton Senna, and Ayrton is not going to be easy to interview after this Grand Prix.
He certainly is not. Laffite, by the way, is one of the people, and there is the arrows. I don't believe contact has been made. Terry Boutsen dismounting, but it did not appear as though that anything really, certainly not life-threatening. It did not appear as though there was any damage. The Arrows had a long weekend. As many of you know, Mark Schurrer was critically injured in a rally crash, and we had an opportunity to talk to Jackie Oliver about that in negotiations this week.
Jackie Oliver, is a very violent accident for Mark Schurrer. What is Mark's condition at the moment?
Well, Mark's still in the Gießen University Hospital in Germany from that accident. As you said, John, the violent nature of the accident is some of the problem. He's very unstable at the present time. His injuries are not that severe. He's broken, I say severe, he's broken a leg in a couple of places, and he's got a few burns. But it was the violent nature of the accident that's really causing his instability at the moment. So they got him heavily sedated. We greatly miss Mark here. We're down to one car because of that, and we wish him a speedy recovery.
As you say, you're down to one car. You were planning to run both cars here. What's the driver situation?
Well, we got into a little technical problem here. We were hoping to run Christian Danner, but there was a lengthy negotiation to extract him from his present contractual arrangement with the Azella team, and those contracts weren't resolved in time, so we didn't nominate him until this morning, which was too late as far as the officials are concerned. So we were out of time and in breach of a technicality, so he's back driving the Azella team.
Mark's co-driver did die in that accident. As we wrap up that, we show you the scrimmage that's beginning to develop for fifth position. That's Ayrton Senna, who's beginning to put the pressure on Rene Arnoux. One other postscript to the Christian Danner interview. Christian, unfortunately, is one of the people who has dropped out of this race early. Other retirees, these, of course, are all unofficial, but by our best count, Teo Fabi, Alexandra Nannini, Derek Warwick, Jonathan Palmer, and Stefan Johansson with that clash that you saw him have with the inside wall.
This is the battle for fifth and sixth place. Now, points are very valuable no matter how small of an amount they are. Sixth place gets 1 point, and fifth place gets 2 points. So with the World Championships the past several years being decided by as little as a half a point, you can see Ayrton Senna and Rene Arnoux, even though they are fifth and sixth at this particular place, they are not going to give up those points. That's what's in their minds, is the points and the total of the points at the end of the year. Senna is certainly leading the World Championship right now, but still, that can be easily eroded, and any one singular point that he can gain here could determine his World Championship all the way down in October.
Ayrton Senna with 25 World Championship points up to this race. Alain Prost is second with 23. Nigel Mansell is in third with 18 points and 1 win. Nelson Piquet Piquet with 1 win. The opening round down in his homeland of Brazil is 4th with 15 points. Remembering again that 9 points to the winner. And in 5th is Keke Rosberg with 11 points. Others scoring points so far in 1986: Johansson, Lafitte, Berger, Arnoux, Alboreto, Fabi, Brundle, and Patrese. We are halfway through the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix. The first 5 are Mansell, Rosberg, Prost, Piquet, Arnoux. Stay with us. The best is yet to come. Gave you the first 5 just before the break. Geez, I hope you were listening, because picking up from there, Senna remains in 6th. He is on the lead lap with our leader, Nigel Mansell. Alboreto is in 7th position. He, too, is on the lead lap. Everybody else is at least 1 lap down. This is the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix. We are on an island, the Ile Notre Dame, just south of the city of Montreal, which itself is on an island. It's really a beautiful setting. This park that we are in, actually, was the park that was constructed for Expo 67. Part of this facility was also used for the 1980 Olympics, and it really is a very nice venue for any type of automobile race, and it is a real bona fide entry into Formula One racing, John.
We're watching the Williams car circle around behind the Ferrari of Michele Alboreto. Larry, a very good news also. Some of our listeners in previous broadcasts may be aware of the fact that Frank Williams, the owner, director, and founder of Williams Racing, had a terrifying and a very serious injury resulting from a road car accident after following his team down to Circuit Paul Ricard for some testing. We were all very worried about Frank's condition, as it became life-threatening at many points throughout a 3-week period. Frank has movement of his head. He has a very severe spinal injury. His upper arms are beginning to come back to life and have feeling in them. He is in constant communication with his team, and walking down the pits today, listening to Nigel Mansell talking to his team manager, there were several very technical points that were being given to him as input directly from Frank Williams. And we have Stefan Johansson has come into our commentary booth here. He has had not the very best weekend, Stefan. He had a very difficult time relative to qualifying and practice. Stefan, Friday the 13th wasn't good for you, and it hasn't gotten any better.
Friday 13th was actually quite good, but it wasn't much good after that.
You were racing with René Arnoux. What happened?
Well, there was no problem of René's. I mean, René and I had a really good dive. I really enjoyed it. But when Dumfries came out of the pit, I don't think he looked in his mirrors, because this corner is very quick and you can't really change direction, and you're totally committed when you're in the corner. And he decided to change direction all of a sudden in the middle of the corner. And there was just, I didn't even have time to react before I hit him.
No place for you to go.
No, certainly not.
What damage is there to your Ferrari, and is it going to be a big problem to fix for Detroit?
Well, I think the car is a write-off, basically.
But you're all right.
I'm not a write-off.
When you saw him coming out of the pits, was there a millisecond of something to think about or to do?
Well, I mean, I thought he was staying on the left, because he was staying on the left all the time, and then all of a sudden I think he saw me, and he decided to try to move out of the way. But I mean, then, he didn't have the speed up, and, there was no way he could accelerate out of the way, and, it was just an inevitable accident.
What was your closing speed on him?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, he's flat in 5th there. He's as quick as the car will go.
So you're doing 140 miles an hour, and he's doing maybe 70?
Yeah.
Well, that's certainly not the most enjoyable sight, to see virtually a solid object coming at you at 70 miles an hour. But Stefan Johansson, we're glad that you have not injured any part. See, you should have let me wear that driver's suit for a half an hour this morning, like I did in Belgium, and you would have just missed him and carried on past Arnoux and at least into the points again.
Yeah, why didn't you?
Because you haven't had it dry cleaned. I told you to get the thing dry cleaned, and I'll wear it. Best of luck in Detroit, and let's hope that they get another car over here for you from Ferrari. I'm sure they will. I'm sure you'll be in good shape.
Okay.
And there we have the Osella parking. We have had many cars dropping out. It's Ghinzani coming out of his car. Obviously, there was no damage to the automobile, but still, Ghinzani has certainly called it a day. The marshal looking back towards the engine, and Ghinzani also looking back there. So it looks like they may have had a bit of a motor failure in that six-cylinder turbocharged motor. We've had a lot of dropouts so far in this particular Grand Prix.
Yeah, we have, John, but, you know, the conditions are not bad. They're not particularly, I would call them good. They're just about perfect, as a matter of fact, for a race day. You don't have the oppressive heat up here in Canada like we had in Brazil. So the cars really have an opportunity to be operating at maximum. There is one of the Olivetti Brabhams coming in. Of course, from this angle, we can't tell exactly who it is.
I think it would have to be Betrezi, because we had Derek Warwick drop out a little bit earlier.
Yep.
Another blown engine again. You can see all of the oil on his helmet there. He certainly has been following someone very close for a long period of time, and that dirt or film that builds up on visors and helmets can be a bit of an annoyance.
One final word about Stefan Johansson. You know, I saw that car break down with fire during qualifying on Friday on the back part of the course, about 1.5 miles away from the pits, and he ran the entire distance without stopping. We were watching him on the monitor back to the pit area. If you ever thought that the Formula One Grand Prix drivers were not in good shape, think about that, and think about what's going on right now as we watch Nelson Piquet put the heat on Alain Prost. Nigel Mansell continues to lead this race, and Piquet gets by. Nelson Piquet has picked up a position, moving into third, maybe reaching down and adjusting that boost control knob for just a quick second, perhaps move around the defending champion, Alain Prost. Rosberg continues to run second. Prost, as we mentioned, now in third. In fourth is Prost. Rene Arnoux is fifth, and in sixth, in the final points position so far, is Ayrton Senna. 46 laps have been completed. Remember, this race will go 77 laps. We've had 4 different winners for 1986. Will we have a fifth? As we look at the replay, we'll hold for just a second as we watch Nelson Piquet putting the moves on Alain Prost as they come down the first half of the long front stretch. There is Prost coming down, coming around the back stretch. They are going to the chicane that's right in the middle of the back stretch. There is Piquet going underneath one of the bridges, making that chicane in the middle of the back stretch, shifting down to about third gear probably, moving back up to the gears, fourth, fifth, and sixth, and now he'll move on and try to catch Rosberg and Mansell. Despite the spectacular kind of speed we have seen from Keke Rosberg his career, he's only won 5 times. That man right there, Nelson Piquet, is on the top 5 list of most wins in a career among the active drivers only. Piquet has won 14 times. There was a quick glimpse of Alain Prost, who has won 23 times, and it seems imminent that he is moving in on the wee Scot Jackie Stewart's all-time career-leading total of 27. But the top 5 winners among the active drivers of all time on Formula One Prost, Emerson Fittipaldi, who you've got to call him an active driver because he's still running actively, of course, in kart. He's on the pole today. Piquet with 14, Alain Jones with 14, and Rene Arnoux with 7.
Just to review the drivers that have fallen out of this Canadian Grand Prix: Christian Danner, Fabi in the Benetton car, Nannini, Warwick, Dr. Jonathan Palmer has gone. As you see, pros coming around his teammate, Hoop Rottengatter. Stefan Johansson, who came to the booth and told us what it was like to be doing 140 miles an hour and coming up on a car doing 70 miles an hour. Betrezi, the other BMW-powered Brabham, also just coming into the pits, and we have word that he has climbed out of the car now. It did look terminal. And Thierry Boutsen in the USF&G Arrows is out. When Boutsen got out of the car, you saw that his steering wheel was in his hand. I always like to make reference that is not a mechanical failure. These steering wheels are detachable from the steering shaft and actually lets the driver get in and out of the car with a greater amount of ease. It's a very small cockpit these days for aerodynamic reasons in Formula One. So when you see a driver coming out holding his steering wheel or throwing his steering wheel, it's not because it has come off by mechanical failure.
No driver has ever won the Canadian Grand Prix more than twice. A number of people have won 2 times, including Piquet, who we've been spending a little bit of time watching here. He's the winner in 82 and 84. He has won, 2 of the last 4 races. Alan Jones has won twice here. Jackie Stewart back in 71 and 72 won twice. And Jackie Ickx in 69 and 70, the 2 of them putting together back-to-back dual wins. But no one driver has ever won more than 2 Canadian Grand Prix. Nigel Mansell, I don't believe he's ever won here, John. So,
no, he has not.
So certainly he would not be cutting into that, but should Piquet be able to move up, obviously he would break that skein. 3 manufacturers, however, have won 4 times in the relatively brief history of the Canadian Grand Prix, which began in 1967. Ferrari, Brabham, and McLaren have each won 4 times.
And of course, the Ferraris finished 1-2 here last year, with Alboreto going into the first place position and Stefan Johansson finishing second. Again, on that very tight shot of Keke Rosberg, you saw the drinking tube going into his helmet. It's very important for the driver to be able to maintain a good fluid level here. Here you see Ayrton Senna still chasing the Lotto-sponsored Rene Arnoux car, but behind him, closing in on him, is his teammate of Jacques Laffite is closing in the other Lotto car. The word Lotto, just for your information, the team is sponsored by the French National Lottery. And of course, they're using Renault engines. It's a Renault chassis, Renault mechanics. It's the Ligier team, owned and founded by Guy Ligier. So the National Lottery sponsors this particular vehicle. It's a very, very French operation. It's the pride of French Gitan cigarettes, also a French product. So here you have an interesting situation building up with one teammate sandwiching Ayrton Senna, being sandwiched by these 2 teammates, and we'll see if any team tactics can come into play. It certainly looks like Laffite is able to catch up to Ayrton Senna quite easily, and we may see a pass coming into view here.
John, the computer says that Laffite is 1 lap down and that the other 2 directly in front of him are on the lead lap with the leader.
Exactly. I don't think Laffite is battling for position, but certainly after that tire stop, it was a late tire stop for Laffite, and his rubber must be handling a little bit better than the people who have been out there for maybe 20 laps on that new rubber. So you certainly could see Laffite getting in between Arnoux and Senna and controlling a bit of a getaway possibly for Arnoux.
We are 2/3 of the way through the 1986 Canadian Grand Prix. Running down quickly for you, and unofficially, we need to add that, of course, the top 10: Mansell, Rosberg, Piquet, Prost. We've documented that a number of occasions. Arnoux 5th, Ayrton Senna in the Rapid Lotus, that quick race car, is in 6th. Michele Alboreto is in 7th. Jacques Laffite, whom we were watching on our screen, he's the 3rd car in line there, is 8th. Martin Brundle in the Data General Tyrrell is in 9th, and Philippe Streff is in 10th position. Only 6 cars, as we mentioned, are showing on the lead lap. Alboreto and Laffite are 1 lap down. 2 laps down is Brundle. By the way, was another one of the crashers on Friday when 10 cars had an incident, either a mechanical breakdown that resulted in fire or this tremendous turbo smoke bomb that we got from Michele Alboreto, or a crash. Showing 2 laps down is Brundle, and Streff is 3 laps down.
I think Jackie Stewart's analogy about the jet lag was an incredibly good insight to what was going on those early days here, especially Friday the 13th on half-dry, half-wet conditions. And Jacques Laffite does come around Senna, under braking into the hairpin. Now we're going to see some team tactics. You can see that Rene Arnoux has actually, and Senna was having a bit of a look at him there, but still, Jacques Laffite powered out of the corner and kept his line perfectly and was able to pull out a bit of a lead. But the important thing is that Rene Arnoux is now a good 2 seconds away from Ayrton Senna in the Lotus, where before Senna was right up his exhaust.
And in regards to points, probably, here we look at it again, here's that move.
Looking to the inside, and Senna being somewhat of a gentleman there under the situation, but still, maybe he was hoping that he could blow by him on the straightaway, but Jack exited the corner perfectly, got the power down, and was able to maintain a good power line, accelerating line down the main straightaway. And certainly Ayrton Senna is not going to be too happy after this Grand Prix.
And John, particularly the reason why it's important is that neither of the Ligiers really figures to be in the points championship when we get down near the end of the season. Senna does, and every point is extremely critical.
Beautiful scene here. You can see
the top 10 10 winners among the active drivers. How about in the career? We mentioned Jackie Stewart with 27, Jimmy Clark with 25, Lauda has 25, Juan Mangill 24, and Prost with 23. Keke Rosberg has lost 2 positions in the last half a lap, last 3/4 of a lap. There you see him trailing his teammate, Alain Prost. Rosberg was running in 2nd position just about 30 seconds ago.
Well, Keke Rosberg is certainly going to be looking at the second half of this race in a very determined manner, but still, right now, it's Alain Prost, number 1. The number 1 car is always designated to the current world champion, and Alain Prost certainly earned that, and he carries it proudly. But now, Alain Prost has his sights on Nelson Piquet in the Honda-powered Williams car. You can see that Nelson's a little bit behind traffic here. He does pull out around the Tyrrell. He does make a clean pass there in that little short chute. Now, if Prost gets right up behind the Tyrrell, they are coming into the S's, and I don't think the Tyrrell's going to be able to move over and let him by. No, he has to stay in that position. As he gets out in the marbles, he's really putting himself offline. Prost goes to the inside. You can see him made a clear pass, and Prost has his sights set on that Williams, and you're going to see him just beginning to wheel him in. But also Nelson Piquet can see all of this happening in his mirrors. His pit signs are certainly not something that he's looking at now. He can see what's happening in himself, and he has certainly the ability to stretch out a lead, but it's going to be a heck of a battle developing between this Honda-powered Williams and the TAG Porsche-powered McLaren.
The big question is, can they muster up enough speed, muster up enough horsepower? These cars are capable of upwards of 1,000 or 1,100 to catch Nigel Mansell. Both of them are showing about 20 seconds or 25 seconds behind, and we have about 20 laps to go.
And of course, the thing is, right now, Nigel Mansell can begin to conserve his tires and conserve his fuel. Nigel Mansell is in one of those boring positions that every driver hopes to be in, with 20-second lead and only a third of the race left to complete. But Nigel Mansell certainly has to keep his concentration up. I once asked Mario Andretti why he drove so hard when he was still so far in the lead. It's because if I was to slow down, I would get out of pace. I would start to miss my braking points and my shift points. And the worst accident I ever had was actually on a cool-off lap when my concentration was not where it should have been. And when you're leading like that, you have to force yourself to put yourself into a competitive position and go ahead and maintain that race rhythm.
If you joined us late, this is a 2.7 mile. I bet you guessed it's a road course, didn't you? Right now, there's Nigel Mansell being trailed by Alain Prost. They're running 2nd and 3rd in the race. The cars are working their way down the backstretch. This race course is sort of like a flattened oval. I described it as a deflated football, or the shape of a race car. If you can imagine a single-seater open-wheeler with no wheels and no front wing, basically that's the shape that this racetrack is in. This is near the end of the backstretch as you are pictured trailing down the back, the slope cowling, the engine cover on an Indianapolis or a Formula One car. They are approaching the north end of the racetrack, and down here you'll see a hairpin. There it is. It's the north end. This is one of 2 hairpins on this race course. You come up, you go past the pit area and down the first half of the front stretch. The front stretch is like the equivalent of running along the bottom of our imaginary single-seater race car. They are approaching the south end of the racetrack, and in about 7 or 8 seconds you'll see them get to that end. There's another hairpin there, which in effect divides this race course, which sits on an island, the Ile Notre Dame, just south of Montreal.
You see the Brazilian flag there being waved. This is Nigel Mansell, but that Brazilian flag there is for his teammate Nelson Piquet. The Brazilians, some of the most enthusiastic race fans in the world, all starting with Emerson Fittipaldi when he came out of Brazil to race Formula Ford in 1969 in a little orange-covered Merlin. And from that career, he moved straight into Lotus in Formula 3 and Lotus in Formula 2, and then Lotus his big break into Formula 1, racing the Lotus 49s and 59s and the Lotus 72s. One of the greatest race car drivers of Formula One, 2-time world champion Emerson Fittipaldi on pole position, way out west of here.
Down to first gear through this tight hairpin. You start moving you up through the gears as you go past the pits. That's where Kale Fabi crashed earlier this week. You saw one of the Osella sitting to the left of your screen at home there. Through the front stretch, there is the leader, Nigel Mansell, up to 6th gear, maybe 140 miles an hour. This little chicane here, you got to get down to 4th or 3rd gear, depending upon how the car is set up. Now we're back at the hairpin at the end of the pits again as we are picking up Nigel Mansell's teammate, Nelson Piquet.
Nelson Piquet actually followed in Emerson Fittipaldi's footsteps and did go on to England just as Emerson did. And then Ayrton Senna followed in Piquet's footsteps and started his career again in Formula 3 and Formula 2 and with a British career.
And I believe that Roberto Moreno began driving race cars at the urging of Nelson Piquet.
Exactly. There's been a great amount of interest in South America in Formula 1, all starting several years ago when their first hero, Emerson Fittipaldi, came out of Brazil and was so successful in the sport. I think this particular broadcast is being taken by 7 countries in South America.
John, 58 laps have been completed. Piquet leads Mansell by about, Mansell leads Piquet by about 25 seconds. And in case you're wondering, is it growing or shrinking? Well, yes, both. It's going back and forth. Somebody's in control. 18 laps to go in this race, a 77-lap race. That's what it was scheduled to go for, and the way things are going now, this might be a long 77 laps for Nigel Mansell because he's the guy in the lead. There has been a change in the top 4. Nelson Piquet has been into the pit since we were away.
Ayrton Senna made just a beautiful pass for that long ongoing battle between he and Rene Arnoux. Ayrton Senna coming in on the brakes, getting by the Ligier car, and seems to be pulling away very quickly now. Ayrton Senna is actually a lap down, has just gone a lap down. He is chasing the leader, but not for the lead. And there you have a change between 6th and 5th, with Ayrton Senna picking up another 2 of those very important points.
Boy, that is a picture that we have not seen in a long time. Ayrton Senna going a lap down in a Formula 1 race.
The only time he used to go a lap, here you see the pass back in the view there, almost touching wheels, but the better part of valor was saved there as he moved back and gave both drivers room to make a safe pass. The responsibility for overtaking is also always given 90% to the overtaking car. So Ayrton Senna coming up into 5th place. Again, you see the little Brazilians standing there with their flag and their little grandstand waving and cheering him on. Possibly those points could win him a championship another 9 races from today.
John, talking about the prospect of a championship, the end of this year, what about this rumor about Senna and De Courage going to Ferrari next year? I considered it to be a rumor with no substance until I heard it mentioned several times in the pits here this weekend.
Well, it is absolutely true that Ayrton Senna did visit Maranello last week and had a 3-hour meeting with Conduttore Ferrari, and I'm sure that they were talking about next year's contract. He is happy with Lotus.
No way they were talking about a new Ferrari for the street, huh?
I'm sure that would be part of the contract, you see. But still, he is very happy at Lotus, and with the performance of the Ferrari cars this year, and the better performance of his Lotus, he really must consider the career situation of that move. They were talking, supposedly, rumored, in the degree of $5 million a year, $10 million for a 2-year contract. Now, Conduttore Ferrari has not been the most generous person, as we have the Williams coming through. That is Nelson Piquet coming back around Keke Rosberg. And Nelson Piquet had a very quick pit stop while we were out to break. All they did was change the right rear tire. But that is a very strong rumor about next year's driver. Michele Alboreto has signed with Ferrari, so it's the Stefan Johansson seat that could be open for Ayrton Senna.
And Stefan, we might add, is scratching, clawing. He's fighting hard. He's wanting to prove to the Ferrari people that he is more than a bona fide second driver. Let's call him another driver. Hopefully the situation of among the equals. There is a quick replay again of Piquet moving under Keke Rosberg as Piquet moves into 3rd position after 61 laps of this race. You know, another thing about that Ayrton Senna situation is that there's a lot of pride that revolves and orbits around any Formula 1 driver, certainly any Formula 1 person. And he has such control over his situation at Lotus that it would seem like that also is a situation he would not like to walk away from. We'll be back. back on the Ile or island of Notre Dame, or Notre Dame if you're a real red-blooded American Yankee. We're just south of Montreal. This is the Canadian Grand Prix of 1986. John, fuel, it seems to pop up as a question so many times in so many automobile races, but historically speaking, fuel has not been a critical factor here at this course.
Not in Montreal. It's the courses where they go up and down the hills, say it's the San Marino Grand Prix in Imola or Spa, where the engines have to push those cars up and down the hills, accelerating out of hairpins like they do here twice. Could drain a bit of fuel, but the team managers were not particularly interested in fuel consumption here. If the engine management computer is off by a 1 percentile, they could have a fuel problem with a particular car. But at this point, Nigel Mansell has a 25-second lead over the second place Prost, and he's backing off. He's conserving his tires, conserving his fuel, so I don't think that fuel will be a problem at the Canadian Grand Prix of this year.
Ayrton Senna in that bright yellow helmet, at least it looks that way on TV. I think we've told you before. It's actually chartreuse in color with deep Kelly green and a very deep blue trim to it. And it's sort of like the McLaren cars. You really got to come here to see it because it's something special as far as the paint. And TV, it comes close in representing what it really looks like, but it doesn't give you the real true picture.
Larry, the reason that the McLaren Marlboro cars in true light, they're actually a day glow orange, but for some reason, both in still photography and on television, it comes out red. It shows a red, the Marlboro red. So that is why it is that strange day glow orange.
A good friend of mine who builds models as an avocation, a very rabid avocation, John Senna back in Indianapolis, tells me that's Rocket Red. That's how it's sold.
Rocket Red. Rocket Red has not hit terminology in Formula One in Europe yet. I'll tell you, one of the best things about being in North America is that at least I can argue with the people on the gates in English. It's so nice. I still have a little bit of problem in places like Portugal and Belgium and so forth. Also, the Monday after the Detroit Grand Prix, this Colorado boy heads back up to the high country out to Breckenridge, Colorado for 5 days before heading back to Europe for the French Grand Prix, and I just can't wait to sit up there in that beautiful valley and look at the place I call home.
Again, after 64 official laps, there's the leader, Nigel Mansell. Talking about that language barrier, John, there is Alain Prost, who is being shown in second position. That really points out another one of the lures, another one of the ambiances of Formula One racing. All these drivers obviously come from...
You mean ambiance.
Ambiance, whatever, yeah, okay. All these drivers obviously come from around the world. There is Piquet, the Brazilian, but they all speak very fluent English, and they have to be adaptable to matter wherever they travel, in Europe or South America, on occasion to Austria or South Africa, to be able to speak the language. And they do quite well at it, and I think it speaks very well for the number of people who are participating in this sport.
Well, English is the language of Formula One. So technically and development-wise, you have to be able to converse in English, and that it can be a bit of a difficulty for a driver. A team certainly has to be able to communicate with his driver, and if he is not, if it's a British team and he cannot converse in English, you are certainly at a disadvantage to someone else that they may be considering with equal talents.
Remember to stay tuned to ESPN today. We will be moving out to Portland, Oregon, the Park of Roses, or the Rose Festival area, a racetrack that is smaller than this, but in many respects it is not all that dissimilar. The CART Indy cars will be visiting the Portland, Oregon area for the race later this afternoon. That race will be live, rain or shine. Yes, it's a road course, so they will have rain tires. They will adorn under those cars should the heavens fall in. Emerson Fittipaldi sits on the pole, and it's likely to be a pretty tight race. It's usually a pretty interesting one out there.
Let's quickly go through the top 10. We only have 4 laps left in this Canadian Grand Prix, and it's Nigel Mansell with a good 25-second lead. Behind him is Alain Prost in the McLaren. Followed behind Alain Prost is Nelson Piquet, the Brazilian. Every lap you can see the Brazilian flag waving there to the left of the circuit. Keke Rosberg, Alain Prost's teammate in the other McLaren. Ayrton Senna having a difficult race in the Lotus. Then it's Farnoux. Then his teammate Jacques Lafitte in the other Ligier. Michele Alboreto, who won this race last year, only circling around now in 8th position. 9th position is Alan Jones in the Ford-powered car, certainly looking for a good result in Detroit. And in 10th position, we have Philippe Streiff, the Frenchman in the Tyrrell.
Well, John, we were getting a little bit of conflicting reports as to how many laps to go in this race. The computer is telling us one thing. Our spotters here in the tower are telling us something else, and we're sensing there's a third alternative. Fortunately, we're in a situation where the leader has a very comfortable lead. So Nigel Mansell, and by the way, the scoreboard will give a fourth vote in here, says 65 laps, 71 laps to go in this race. The leader, Nigel Mansell, has a very comfortable lead. He has about a 20-second lead over Alain Prost, and Nelson Piquet has dropped significantly behind Prost.
Well, at least we're in an advantage position to see when the checkered flag does come out. It's right outside our window here, so we'll let you know the moment we see it. Before the end of the race, I must wish my father, Babe Bizignano, a very happy Father's Day from his son, John, and my brother, Joe, who came up from Des Moines, Iowa, to this race, his first Grand Prix. And I'll tell you, sometimes when we're so close to motor racing, Larry, we lose the impact of this powerful sport. And my brother, Joe, has certainly given me a good insight of what it's like to come to one of these events for your first time. The crowds of people, the national heroes circulating around here, the beautiful cars, the beautiful people. And it's certainly been a great race with all of that, and happy Father's Day to my dad.
Well, you're going to have to indulge me, everybody. And now, John, you've given me a commitment. My father, Tom, home watching in Toledo. Happy Father's Day to you, too, and to my father-in-law, Bill Lutz, in Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, Bizignano did this to us, but I'm very happy that he did it because it gives me an opportunity to say hi to everybody and hi to everybody's father. And by the way, thank you for all the support from all of you who have given us, who do ESPN auto races. The support has been spectacular. It's been very warm and gratifying. Thanks again. We're getting down near the very end of this race. There is Keke Rosberg. It looked like Keke was going to be one of the people threatening to win this Canadian Grand Prix, but he has slipped down more than a minute behind the leader, Nigel Mansell. There is Ayrton Senna. Pre-race, one of the pre-race favorites. Ayrton is one lap down. Yes, Ayrton Senna is one lap down to the leader. By the way, he tried to pull off one of those 11th hour qualifying runs yesterday. He actually started his last lap with just 20 seconds to go in the qualifying session, but it wasn't a good enough lap to take over number one position. There is the leader, Nigel Mansell, coming around. He's thinking checker. The crew is wondering, where are we at? Do we have one lap to go or 2 laps to go? He's coming around down near the north end of this racetrack. Nigel Mansell.
Nigel Mansell, of course, this would be his second consecutive win. There has never been a British driver to win 3 Grand Prix in a row. We're going to see if they give him the checkered flag. He's coming underneath the announce booth, and I do not see any checkered flag. There's certainly one more lap to go. Nigel Mansell looked like he was anticipating. The announcers around me are hollering and screaming. Rubberman is bouncing all over the room. The flagman now has picked up the checkered flag.
1 lap to go.
This definitely has to be Nigel Mansell's last lap, and that is the most painful lap of the whole Grand Prix.
Let's take him around. There is Keke Rosberg, who is, where's he at here? He is moving through the back half of
He looked a little slow to me.
He's going very slow. Maybe Keke has got a fuel problem. Maybe not. Very difficult to assess.
He ran out of fuel in San Marino, remember?
And there is Lafitte. You can tell by the dark helmet moving through in the Ligier, going down through the backstretch. This is the second half of the backstretch. Following Keke around now, trying to nurse
Keke Rosberg's definitely slowing for sure.
He really is. There goes Lafitte by, watching for Rosberg again. And Rosberg is not even in the picture now. The cameraman trying to find him as Lafitte continues to motor around. Here comes Keke.
He's not even moving to the side of the track. He can't even... The starter has the checkered flag in his hand. I hope we go back to the finish of the race.
Yeah, there is the backstretch. The leader, Nigel Mansell. The backstretch divided in half by that chicane. You'll watch the camera now move to the inside. We're in the middle of the course. Nigel will go right by you, whisk down toward the north hairpin. Here it comes. Watch for the Labatt sign on the pavement. There it is, the north hairpin. Nigel Mansell looking for victory here in the Canadian Grand Prix of 1986. This will be Nigel's second Grand Prix win in a row. Checkered flag out for the Brit, Nigel Mansell. The right fist of power and glory and victory comes up as Nigel Mansell wins again. There goes Brundle going by. Brundle in jeopardy of going down one more lap. Here comes Alain Prost. Alain Prost will picking up 6 very valuable points toward the World's Championship. As a matter of fact, those 6 points will probably put him ahead of Ayrton Senna in the World's Championship so far, moving Alain up to 29 points so far.
Yes, 25 points. 25 points currently being held by Ayrton Senna and only gaining 2 points here. So he moves up to 27 points as the World Championship heats up. Nelson Piquet comes across the line. All the Brazilians in this room are certainly celebrating that particular event, but we have to see where is Keke Rosberg. Is Rosberg, we haven't seen him come across the line at this particular moment yet. He should be coming in just behind Piquet, but they have not shown Rosberg cross the line yet.
He had a reasonably comfortable lead over the fifth running Ayrton Senna, but of course Ayrton remained at speed as we came down near the end of this race, and Rosberg was at the very end of the lead lap.
Nigel Mansell waving to the crowd, a young driver from the Midlands of England, brought into Formula One by the late Colin Chapman of Lotus. Nigel Mansell with the Williams Honda, and what a great joy for Frank Williams sitting back in England listening to the live commentary from the BBC. James Hunt and Murray Walker doing that commentary. The crowd showing their appreciation for his great drive around this Canadian Grand Prix. Nigel Mansell, one of the great individuals for this year, past year. He won his first Grand Prix last year. He went for that third victory last year. He had 2 going for him in a row, maybe in Detroit, where he has done very well. Maybe that'll be the first time a British driver has 3 Grand Prix victories in a row.
I will say, John, that I'm very happy for Nigel. All those years of apprenticeship at Lotus, it's kind of a shame in some respects that he can't be experiencing. Speaking about Lotus, there is Ayrton Senna, who has gotten out of his race car. It's kind of a shame in some respects that Nigel couldn't be enjoying all of the success with the Lotus for whom he spent so many years. But he's with Williams, and it's working just fine. Thank you. That young Britainer may be taking all of this in stride, but he just won his 2nd Grand Prix in a row. The top 10, Nigel Mansell, Alain Prost, Nelson Piquet, Keke Rosberg, Ayrton Senna unofficially, and René Arnoux. Those first 6, of course, getting World's Championship points, followed by Jacques Lafitte, Michele Alboreto, Martin Brundle, and Alain Jones.
Well, with my mathematics here, I show that Prost is currently in the World Championship at 29 points, and then you have a tie between Ayrton Senna and Nigel Mansell with 27 points, with Piquet having 18 points by picking up another 4 points here today. The World Championship, one third of the way through the season, is certainly a very tight battle, as we can see it developing throughout the rest of the year. We have Rosberg in 5th place with 14 points, and Jacques Lafitte with 7 points in 6th position, and then comes Stefan Johansson. Unfortunately, he could have gained some very important points here in Canada, but the World Championship is hot and heavy moving into Detroit. If you can make it to the Detroit race, it's one of the best organized events on the Grand Prix trail, and I would recommend for anyone who can get anywhere near that event to travel to Detroit and see one of these things in person.
If the names of Andretti, of which there are 2, Unser, of which there are 2 on occasion, Kogan, Rahal, Sneva, Guerrero, are of interest to you, you're going to want to stay tuned to ESPN today, because we're going out to Portland, Oregon, on the other coast of the North American continent. This will be across the border into the country of the United States of America, where the ESPN signal, of course, originates from, for the CART IndyCar race from Portland, Oregon this afternoon, out there where Emerson Fittipaldi is sitting on the pole. Also, don't forget to stay with us for the French Grand Prix. The Formula One season continues on ESPN on Sunday, July 6th at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific time. Nelson Piquet will return, of course, along with all the other Formula One stars. Nelson to defend his 1985 crown. The Big Five is going to continue, and can anybody break into the Big Five of 1986? Well, we'll be back with some more thoughts on today's Canadian Grand Prix, where Nigel Mansell has brought home another win for Frank Williams. He and his teammate are having a good year.
On behalf of the Labatt Brewing Company, I would like to thank the thousands of people who came in to see this event.
Win
today.
3 Formula One races in a row. You know, Teddy Yip earlier this year said he would pay $50,000 bonus to any driver who won 3 in a row, plus $50,000 to his favorite charity.
Where is Teddy Yip these days?
Teddy Yip is back home in the Orient, I assume, but obviously is keeping an eye on Formula One racing.
Well, Teddy Yip has been one of the great patrons of Formula One for many years. Of course, he started and funded the Theodore team for many years, which gave some fantastic drivers their break into the higher ranks of this Grand Prix racing. As you can see here, it's teams like Teddy Yip and some other people, who Nigel Mansell getting a break, that make these people world champions or potential world champions.
Well, Nigel Mansell wins today for the 4th time in his career. With these 2 wins in 1986, coupled with his 2 wins late in 1985, he is really fulfilling the promise that he gave and seemed to flash for so many years with Lotus.
Yes. You know, when he was with Lotus, he was certainly in a position to do well, but he was still a bit overpowered by his teammate and the team situation. It's when he came into Williams that he was allowed